The burning of baby Lindbergh, the crime that stole America's innocence. Part 1. When the Eagle Breaks Wings. Duration, 15 min. The background music is solemn, somewhat heroic of the 1920s, but contains a deep sadness. The film opens with black and white footage of Charles Lindbergh and his Spirit of St. Louis plane as he is greeted by millions in New York and Paris. In the 1920s, America had a hero, a living god. His name was Charles Lindbergh. In 1927, this young 25-year-old aviator did the unthinkable. He flew solo, non-stop, across the Atlantic, from New York to Paris. The world stopped watching. When he landed safely, he was not just a pilot. He had become a symbol of American courage, maturity, and indomitable spirit. He was called Lucky Lindy, the Lone Eagle. He married Anne Morrow, a brilliant and talented writer and diplomat. They were America's royal couple. And in 1930, their happiness was complete when they had their first son. Hart Charles Augustus Lindbergh Jr. was born. The press affectionately called him the Eaglet. To escape the scrutiny of the public, they built a large house in a quiet, deserted place in Hopewell, New Jersey. It was a home, a sanctuary, built to protect the peace and innocence of children. Little did they know that, in that very sanctuary, on one fateful night, the innocence of not only their family, but of America, would be stolen forever. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Journey in History. Our story today begins on the night of March 1932. It was a cold and windy Tuesday night. Inside the Hopewell house, Charles Lindbergh was working in the study. His wife, Anne, had just come out of their 20-month-old son's room after a good night's sleep. At 9 p.m., Lindbergh heard a strange noise, like wind, but he didn't think much of it. At 10 p.m., the boy, Betty Gow, came into the room to check. She went to the old bed and found it empty. At first, she thought that perhaps Anne had taken the boy. She asked Anne. Anne asked Charles. No one answered. The golden event quickly turned to utter horror. They ran upstairs, searching everywhere. The blankets were still there, but the children were gone. Charles Lindbergh grabbed his gun and ran outside, shining a flashlight into the darkness. He found nothing but footprints in the dirt under his son's window. And then, they found the first piece of evidence. A beautifully rickety homemade wooden ring, one step down, not far from the house. And on the windowsill, the most important connection, the one that started the mad hunt. A letter demanding payment. The letter was written in some seriously broken English, with strange symbols. It demanded a tuition account of 50, 0, an amount for overtime. It warned Lindbergh not to warn of danger, otherwise the baby young would die. The kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby had officially begun. The crime of the century had taken place. By this time the next morning, the news was dangerous all over the world. America's hero had struck in his safest place. If the Lindbergh family wasn't safe, who could be safe? A wave of fear and indignation swept across the country. The New Jersey police, led by Colonel Norman Schwarzkopf Sr., father of the famous Gulf War general who would later become a general, began an investigation. But it quickly became a mess. The show field was cluttered with people, and thousands of fake leads from people looking to get attention had returned, confusing the police. Amidst the violence, strange characters began to appear, turning the investigation into a media circus. Dr. John Condon, especially Jaffe, a 72-year-old retired school principal in the Bronx, New York. Believing he could help, he placed a stub in the newspaper, offering to act as a go-between and offering to pay an additional 10 in master's money. Surprisingly, the kidnappers contacted him. He became the official go-between for Lindbergh and the mystery men, Al Capone. Yes, the gangster we've been talking about. From prison, Capone made a shocking offer. He would use his underworld network to find the child, and in exchange, the government would release him. The offer was rejected, but it shows how big the case had become. The search dragged on for weeks in vain. The kidnappers communicated with Dr. Condon through newspaper ads and secret letters. They directed him to haunting meetings in cemeteries at night. During one such meeting at St. Raymond Cemetery, Dr. Condon met a man with a thick German accent who called himself John. Condon could not make out his face in the darkness. After much negotiation, John gave Condon the Lindbergh baby's pajamas as proof. And then, on the night of April 2, the ransom exchange took place. Dr. Condon, as instructed, took the 50 to another cemetery. He met John and handed him the suitcase of money. In return, John gave him a piece of paper. The paper said that the baby was safe on a boat called Nellie, anchored off the coast of Massachusetts. Charles Lindbergh, in a state of extreme joy and hope, flew his own plane to scour the coast. He searched for the Nellie. He searched for his little boy, but there was no boat called Nellie. The child was nowhere to be found. The huge ransom was gone, and the kidnappers had once again disappeared into the darkness. The Lindbergh family and the entire nation had been cruelly deceived. Their hopes were shattered, and the biggest question remained: where is Little Eagle? Part 2, The Hunt for John. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Part 2 of the Lindbergh kidnapping saga. In the previous part, we ended with the nation holding its breath. The 50 ransom had been paid. A promise had been made, but the ship Nellie was just a mirage. Baby Lindbergh was still missing. For more than a month, the Lindbergh family lived in a constant state of hope and fear. Was their son alive? Had the kidnappers made contact? And then, on May 12, 1932, a truck driver pulled up on a deserted road just a few miles from the Lindbergh home. He went into the nearby woods for a personal reason, and there he found the answer. Underneath the rotting leaves, the decomposing body of a newborn baby. Charles Lindbergh, with great courage, went to identify the body. Although the body was not intact, he recognized his son by certain features in the boy's teeth and clothing. The medical examiner concluded that the boy had died from a severe blow to the head, probably on the night of the kidnapping. The boy had probably been dead for about 2 months. This meant that the entire ransom negotiation, the promises, had been a cruel hoax. The kidnappers had taken the money while knowing that the child was dead. America's hopes had been dashed. Sorrow turned to anger. The search for the missing child had now become a hunt for the killer, but the search was difficult. The only clues the police had were the ransom notes and Dr. Condon's account of a man named John with a thick German accent. Thousands of leads came in, but nothing came. Time passed. A year, then 2. The case seemed to have reached a dead end. The public began to lose hope that the killer would ever be brought to justice. But the investigators had a secret weapon, an ace up their sleeve that they had been patiently waiting for. It was the ransom. Before handing over the money, the investigators did something incredibly clever. The entire 50 was paid in gold certificates. And more importantly, they recorded the serial number of each one. And here's where history turned. Soon after, in an effort to combat the Great Depression, President Franklin D. Roosevelt ordered all gold certificates withdrawn from circulation. Anyone using these coins would be immediately flagged. The ransom had become a ticking time bomb for the kidnapper. He had the money, but he couldn't spend it safely. And then the bomb began to leak. Over the course of 2 years, bank tellers and cashiers across the East Coast were alerted. One by one, matching gold certificates with matching serial numbers began to appear. One in a movie theater, one in a grocery store. The police painstakingly drew a map, and they realized that the vast majority of the bills were being spent in a very small geographic area, the Bronx and Upper Manhattan in New York, where there were large German immigrant communities. They knew they were close to catching the culprit. The killer was nearby. They just needed a little luck. And that luck came on September 18, 1934, more than 2 years after the kidnapping. At a gas station in Manhattan, a man with a thick German accent used a 10 bill to pay for his gas. The gas station attendant, Walter Lyle, became suspicious. By regulation, he was required to record the customer's license plate number on the receipt. That small gesture, a careful habit, changed everything. When the bill was handed over to the bank, it was immediately identified as ransom money. The police had what they needed, a license plate. The manhunt ended quickly. The license plate was registered to a German immigrant carpenter living in the Bronx. His name was Bruno Richard Hauptmann. The police raided Hauptmann's home. He initially denied the crime, but when they searched the garage, they found it. Hidden in the wall was a wad of bills containing $14,600. All of it was Lindbergh's ransom money. The hunt for John is over, but the biggest battle, the legal battle to decide this man's fate, is just beginning. Part 3. The Trial of the Century. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the final and most dramatic part of the story of the Lindbergh baby kidnapping. In the previous part, after more than 2 years of searching, the police finally arrested the prime suspect, Bruno Richard Hauptmann. Now, all eyes of the world are on a small town called Flemington, New Jersey, where the trial known as the Trial of the Century will take place. It had become a real media circus. Hundreds of journalists, photographers, and even Hollywood stars had flocked here. People sold tickets to watch the trial, sold souvenir wooden ladders. The pain of a family had become an entertainment event for the public. Facing each other in the courtroom were two forces. On the prosecution side was David Wylance, an ambitious lawyer. On the defense side was Edward J. Riley, a famous lawyer nicknamed the Bull of Brooklyn, and Bruno Richard Hauptmann, from beginning to end, always affirmed one thing: he was innocent. So what did the prosecution have against Hauptmann? They built their case on a series of circumstantial pieces of evidence, but when put together, they formed a formidable picture. Evidence No. 1, the ransom money. This was the incontrovertible evidence. Nearly 15,000 was found in Hauptmann's garage. Hauptmann's explanation was weak and contradictory. He initially said it was his savings, then said a friend named Isidor Fisch had left it for him before returning to Germany and dying. No one believed this story. Evidence No. 2, the handwriting. Leading handwriting experts compared Hauptmann's handwriting to 14 ransom notes. They all came to the same conclusion. They were written by the same person. Evidence No. 3, witness testimony. Dr. Condon, the JAFC intermediary, pointed the finger at Hauptmann at, "This is the John I saw in the cemetery." Charles Lindbergh testified that he recognized Hauptmann's thick German accent as the one he had heard that night in the cemetery. And the final piece of evidence, the most famous, was the prosecution's trump card: the ladder. Investigators meticulously analyzed the homemade wooden ladder left at the scene. A wood expert named Arthur Kohler did something extraordinary. He traced the ladder back to its original source, and he discovered that one of the ladder's planks, marked Plant No. 16, was an exact match to a missing floorboard in Hauptmann's attic, not just the type of wood, but the planing and nail holes. It seemed like every piece of the puzzle fit together. A picture of the crime had been painted before the jury. The defense tried to fight back. They argued that all the evidence was circumstantial, that there were no fingerprints of Hauptmann at the scene. They argued that the police had been negligent and that they might have set up their client, a German immigrant, as a scapegoat in response to public pressure. But those efforts were too weak compared to the weight of the evidence presented by the prosecution. After 11 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty. Bruno Richard Hauptmann was sentenced to death by electric chair. During the entire ordeal, he was repeatedly offered a deal. If he confessed to his accomplices, his sentence would be commuted. But until the very last moment, until he was led into the execution chamber on April 3, 1936, Hauptmann insisted, "I am absolutely innocent of what I am accused of." The case is closed, but the questions remain forever. Did Hauptmann really act alone? How could a carpenter carry out such an elaborate plan? Did someone in the Lindbergh family inadvertently leak information to the kidnapper? Or was Hauptmann really just a pawn in a larger conspiracy? These conspiracy theories persist to this day. But we must admit that, despite the doubts, the weight of the evidence presented in court still pointed in one direction: Bruno Richard Hauptmann. The kidnapping of a young girl Lindbergh left a lasting legacy. It led to the US Congress passing the Lindbergh Law, making kidnapping a federal crime investigated by the FBI. It also demonstrated the power of forensic science in solving crimes. But perhaps its greatest legacy is an invisible scar on the soul of America. This case is more than a family tragedy. It is the fall of an icon. It shows that even the greatest hero, in the safest home, can be vulnerable. The eagle's nest has been violated. And after that fateful night, America seemed to have lost a part of its innocence and could never feel safe again. Thank you for following the entire story of one of the most shocking cases in history. Don't forget to share your thoughts on the unanswered questions of this case. Goodbye, and see you on the next journey to history.